Also had a question from Nancy Hand, Facebook question. She said, hi, in Leviticus chapter 24, towards the end, where it says, whoever kills a man must be put to death. Is that to be taken literally? And I do think that's a very interesting question on the part of Nancy Hand. And by the way, in the Legacy reading plan, right now we're working through Leviticus. So the very passage that is in question here, Leviticus 24:21, a lot of people are encountering it if they're going through the Legacy reading plan. And if you're not going through the Legacy reading plan, you can get that plan for free on the web at equip.org. That passage, by the way, says that anyone who takes the life of a human being is to be put to death. If anyone takes the life of someone's animal, well, then you have to make restitution. Anyone who injures his neighbor is to be injured in the same manner. Fracture for fracture, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, etc. But whoever kills a human being is to be put to death. And there are many other passages in the Bible that stipulate capital punishment for the crime of premeditated murder. You can look at Exodus, for example. Anyone who strikes a person with a fatal blow, that person has to be put to death. But if anyone schemes and kills someone deliberately, that person is to be taken from my altar and put to death, which is different than if it is not done intentionally, which is also included as part of Exodus chapter 21. So if you look at the passages careful, what you will notice is that murder is a capital crime, and that murder is a capital crime needs a punishment, and that punishment is not limited to a theocratic kingdom. It is a punishment that is universal. In other words, it applies in the past, and I would argue it applies today. Because after the flood, God says to Noah, whoever sheds human blood, by humans shall their blood be shed. Why? Because in the image of God, God has made humankind. They bear the imprimatur of the one who created them. Within the ancient theocratic kingdom of Israel, well, there are a lot of different crimes punishable by death. But in all cases, except premeditated murder, the guilty person can provide a ransom or a substitute for his life. And that leads to the question of how we ought to view capital punishment. I sort of alluded to it, but let me expand on it. I noted that in the very first book of the Bible, God clearly communicates God's position concerning capital punishment. And that passage not only predates the Mosaic law, but it demands universal adherence because of the sanctity of life. And I think you can go further and say that in Exodus 21 and Deuteronomy 19, the Bible reaffirms God's perspective on capital punishment, underscoring the principle of life for life. Because to murder a person who is made in the image of God, as I just mentioned, is not only to show contempt for the apex of God's creation, but also to show contempt for the very one who created the apex of his creation. And thus, while capital punishment might be reprehensible in the secular worldview, it's pretty basic to a biblical worldview. I should make one other point, and that is capital punishment is implicitly validated in the New Testament as well. A number of different places you can look up for yourself. John chapter 19, Acts 25, Luke chapter 23, and other places. The bottom line is this: God instituted capital punishment in the earliest stages of human civilization before the Mosaic law. And capital punishment is never abrogated. It's not abrogated by Jesus, not by the apostles, and therefore, I would argue that capital punishment appears to be an enduring moral principle which ends up undergirding the sanctity of life.